So the book is called Born for This by Chris Guillebeau or Guillebeau. I don't know if he's French or not. Essentially, I guess I should give you the essentials at the end. Chapter 1 talks about, it's about finding a right career path, basically, for people. Chapter 1 is about essentially not looking for a job that you can fit into, but rather finding a career path and a job that best is suited for your talents and skill set. And not to go about looking for jobs in the traditional sense by confining yourself to only one field and basically not going about things the way they've always been done because other people it worked for them. And in chapter 1 he talks about how basically the best way to go about this is obviously not quitting your main job, because financially if you're not viable yet, that's going to be a disaster. So if you find this, is asking basically for people to start a small business along their main job and he says it can be done in just a few weeks. And then he talks about the 100 People Project, which I won't go into now, but he speaks about later. That was chapter 1. Chapter 2, the most important points were that if you haven't found what's right for you, it's fine. It's all about trial and error. Start experimenting, things you like to do. And most people, he says that, traditionally, most people believe that you have to follow a strict script of finding a career path, university, 4-year college, and then graduate school if it's required, and then obviously I think more regarding sales, people are going to go into MBAs and things like that, but he doesn't really talk about education at all in his book. So he says, don't follow other people's examples, paths, create your own. And doesn't, again, if it just because it worked for someone else, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. That's really the main highlights from chapter 2. Now, let's move on to 3. In 3, he talks about how joy, money, and flow are the most important things to finding what's out there and perfect for you. What he means, obviously, joy and money don't have any real explanations necessary, but flow, which was interesting, I hadn't come across it before. Basically, he defines that as a mental state in which you're completely immersed in an activity, essentially in the zone. So maybe you sit down to do some work and it's the kind of the right career path, the right field for you, and you forget about everything else, food, water, you do your best work and you kind of you're so zoned in, you forget about everything else. That's what he considers the flow. Let's see. Okay, so and in this chapter he also talks about listing, basically be realistic with yourself. He talks about how could you do a 9-to-5 job. Is that something you could do? Would it make you happy to work from home, in an office, solo environment, in a team? So he says, don't lie to yourself about what might make you happy. You just have to be realistic and say, these are things that would make me happy and these are things that are not going to make me happy. Chapter 4. Let's have a look. Don't have fear. Basically, chapter 4 talks about conquering your fear and developing a backup plan. So trial and error in this one, he says, is fine. Don't think that you're going to fail, and even if you're going to fail, it's only a minor setback. It's not something that's really going to be a huge detriment to you. What could go wrong? I mean, except for losing some face, maybe a little bit of embarrassment. Really, what could go wrong? I'm sure he's not alluding to, putting finances, everything you're worth into something and then it going belly up. That's a big one. But most fears, he says, are insignificant and not really valid. Another important point in this chapter 4 is don't let the fear of missing out steer your decisions. So basically, just because a job came up and they wanted you doesn't mean it's right for you, doesn't mean you should take it, and because it might end up in misery. So don't just take it because you feel like you're going to miss out and another opportunity will not come about. You need to get away from the idea that opportunities are so finite. And the backup plan that he alludes to is basically don't spend all that you earn, have a buffer, have some savings in case things go wrong. Excuse me, that's chapter 4. Number 5 is so basically making a list of strengths and weaknesses, because he says that look, you're suddenly not going to be very good at your weaknesses, and your strengths are not going to dissipate. So be realistic about what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. And then he talks about basically this 100 people that I mentioned in the first paragraph is about he basically to start marketing and networking. He suggests to find the 100 people, most relevant people, maybe the closest people to you, and offer them 15-minute consultations for free. Now, he doesn't really go into, because this is kind of generic, he can't go into what you're going to offer them, what you're going to do. But I guess by this point, you have to have some kind of product or service or advice, and you're going to offer it to 100 people for free, 15 minutes to network, to get ideas, to become more confident about speaking. And he suggests in this that it's always important to remember that your writing and speaking skills should be always on point and good, because these are the two things that are going to serve you the best and are you always going to have to rely upon. Now, chapter 6. So chapter 6 is about developing the business on the side whilst keeping the day job. He just says basically essentially an hour, or whatever you can devote to this is fine as long as it's consistent. And don't be so driven, don't be so obsessed with $1 million idea, like a big idea. Instead, try and answer these important questions, and these are: what service will you provide? Who are your customers? What's your budget? And how can you market this? And what problem will you solve? So the problem will you solve was third on the list, but I missed it. So basically, what are you going to offer and how are you going to market it? Now, he says just make sure you don't quit your day job before you can, but only do so if you're making ends meet, and you basically don't put yourself in financial hot water. Only if you have enough money coming in that it can support you, because it's really not it's not a priority for him. I mean, he's talking, the book concentrates, I guess, on the initial ideas of forming a business. It's nothing after the initial get-go. It doesn't really go into obviously any detail. So basically, don't put yourself in financial hot water. Chapter 7, basically he's starting to backtrack back to 1 and talk about how you have to find a position that's right for you, and you have to find a firm or some kind of agent, or whether it's yourself or someone else, to market it, because you can't go out there looking for a position that's perfect for you. You have to create it, and you have to find someone or some people or an audience to essentially consume it. So emphasizes that agents really aren't necessary anymore. If you don't want, you can market yourself. We don't need to go and give a percentage to a publisher or a music manager or anything like this. And building the audience, obviously recommends social networking, be it the first stage or really the best way to go about it. But he says that essentially really depends on your field. Might not be social networking for you, And number 8, the last chapter, says that you shouldn't limit yourself to one niche, and everyone thinks that they have to devote themselves to only one thing, but it doesn't need to be. And you can find multiple talents that you have, multiple talents and areas, and how a career can change depending on your interests and needs as the future comes, because we have to be more flexible. I guess he doesn't allude to that, but I think that that's important to note, that we really don't know where the future is headed in terms of automation, things like that. So we have to be more flexible, more nimble. Now, my only critique of this last chapter in particular was that it's easy in some areas to be nimble and flexible, but not others. Obviously, professionals like doctors, lawyers, things like that cannot be. You can't just say, oh, well, I did the law thing for a little bit. Maybe I'll try surgery. That 12 years of post high school education to be a surgeon. So really, I guess this is suited to people, to careers that don't involve professional accreditation, where you don't need licenses to practice in the areas. So apart from that, a great point. I guess it's geared more towards sales, whatever that may be, some consumer goods, whether that's services or products. I guess overall you could say that it's a great book, and it talks about finding your passion and not really worrying about how you're going to find a job suitable for it. The most important thing is to find the passion, and invariably there is a market out there for you.